Hey there guys, this is Coach Aaron, and I'm going to do some Danish Gambit Blitz game action, a little fun. I'm going to do about 3 of these videos. These are really targeted for beginners and intermediate players to kind of improve their attacking. The Danish Gambit is not necessarily a completely sound opening, but it's a lot of fun. And I always think that people should play it just to work on attacking. I mean, that's one of the main things in chess is to learn how to be an attacker. And admittedly, if someone plays the Danish Gambit accepted as black and they take 2 pawns, drop 2 pawns early on, 2 pawns is a lot. For example, the main idea would be e4, e5, capture, play c3, they capture on c3, bishop to c4, they capture again, and here's the main idea, right? The main idea is you have these amazing diagonal pieces working together, and here we're talking about d5 for the queen, just maybe to target over here, but you're giving up 2 pawns. That's a lot. The longer the game goes on, 2 pawns is a winning advantage towards the end of the game. But you do have some amazing, again, diagonal pieces especially. So that's the main gist of the Danish Gambit. Practice attacking. And here's a 3-minute blitz game. Danish Gambit is also just a ton of fun. Doesn't matter what level you are for blitz. For 5 minutes or 3 minutes especially. A lot of fun. Puts a lot of pressure on the opponent. All right, so here's one of the quick games I just played recently. And e4, e5, d4. They accepted. E takes d4. I played c3. They took again, and I played bishop c4. So if they completely accept the Danish Gambit, they're going to take on b2, and my bishop's going to go there. Not everyone takes all these pawns. Sometimes they take on d4, and that's it. Sometimes they take on c3, and that's it. And sometimes they take all 3 pawns. Munch, munch, munch. Here, though, the opponent actually played knight f6. So the number 1 move is to take. That's the number 1 move played in this position, capture. Then bishop takes. That's just the number 1 move. And there are some other ideas here for black instead. They can try to bring out the bishop. Some people try to do that right away. But the number 2 move is actually knight to c6. Kind of targeting some of the center right away. It does make some sense, though, to me to play the knight f6 instead, because you want to get these pieces out of the way as black and get your king safe. And if you're not taking on b2, you have 1 bishop already aiming there, but the other bishop's not quite aiming. Whoops, let's get rid of that. The other bishop's not quite aiming at the king yet, though it is in the area. So it does make some sense to clear this out as black. And you can follow up with the bishop coming out and a move or 2. Or even bishop e7 perhaps. But one of the things about playing an early c3 for white is now my queen can go to b3 at the right time and do a lot of pressure. So actually the number 1 move here is knight takes on c6. Makes a lot of sense, right? You take this pawn while you're protecting from their knight, and now you are actually only 1 pawn down, right? 6 versus 7, and you are totally controlling, basically, the sweet center. As Yasser Sarawan likes to say, the sweet center. The sweet center is these 4 squares. You're a little bit ahead in development, but more important than development is you're way ahead in piece happiness. You have a ton of pieces that already have a lot of places they can go. And this is very, very strong. So you're a little bit ahead in development, better control of the center or sweet center, and you have a ton of piece happiness. So this makes a lot of sense. But this is not, to me, the true Danish Gambit style, and I'm playing the Danish Gambit. So when they play knight f6 attacking my pawn, I actually ignore that for the moment. I'm not worried about that. For example, when the knight takes this pawn on e4, maybe it doesn't work immediately, but there are lots of ideas in these type of positions where bishop can take immediately on f7 check, and you have queen d5 check, picking up the knight perhaps. Doesn't quite work yet. Because this is an open E line and your king is still here, so anytime they play queen e7, it'll pin your queen. We don't want to just win a pawn and make them lose castling just to trade queens. We want to attack. Danish Gambit, again, attacking. So the number 1 move is actually knight takes on c6. The other move here, because the e-pawn's being attacked, is a lot of people play e5. Again, not in the spirit of Danish Gambit, because black can still capture on b2, which is what I want. And I want my bishop to be on b2, but I don't want my pawn to be in the way. So for a little while, I would rather keep this diagonal open in case they take. And I actually kind of don't take on c3 for a while. At the right time, I still do. You want to get your knight into the game, and so you'll take back if they're not going to take on b2. But I don't do it immediately. I actually, in response to knight f6, I play, I think, a little bit more in the spirit of the Danish Gambit, knight f3. I'm not worried about them taking this pawn. If anything, now that I can castle, having a rook on the e line would be great, except that my e-pawn's in the way, so I'm almost saying take it. The truth also is, and let's back up real quick, this is just some Danish Gambit talk real quick, is that how does white succeed in this opening? Well, one of the reasons when white succeeds is the fact that we keep control of d5, at least for a long time. If black can control d5, it actually takes away a lot from white. Right now, we have our queen at some point, our bishop and our pawn are controlling, so they can't play a freeing d5. Fighting back in the center, at least not yet. And if they take our e-pawn, well, the knight right now is fighting for d5, so it would be on e4. And again, I'll have the bishop and the queen for the moment, so I'm still controlling d5. Controlling d5 kind of keeps black cramped a little bit and makes it harder for him to develop. And if I can get a queen, let's say, on b3, suddenly I have a battery aiming at for the f-pawn, and I'm putting pressure on their b-pawn. You know, I mean, this is a very tough opening for black, especially in Blitz. So I like to stay in the style of the Danish and play knight f3. Kind of want them to keep taking, perhaps. I put my bishop there, and I want to be able to castle as soon as possible. So they played d6. Not, I think, the best move, and I think the computer also agrees with me. The computer is talking about d5 being the best choice. Boom. And this is not an easy move to play for black, but it does remind you of, let's say, many openings where someone sacrifices at least a pawn. Danish Gambit were trying to sacrifice actually 2 pawns. And one of the best ways to refute a gambit is to accept the material, but then give it back at the right time. So just like the fried liver, for those of you who play the fried liver, they play a d5 at the right time, and it kind of blocks stuff up. If we win this pawn back and we have our pawn on d5, we're blocking our bishop. If we take with the bishop, they remove it, and that relieves a little bit of the pressure. So I can understand d5. Not a move, though, easy to play. They played d6. Well, what other choices are there then? Well, they could continue with taking. This is very Danish Gambit oriented. A lot of times black might not take immediately, but at a move or two later, they still take on b2. Usually they do that because it frees up b4, and now they can check. So this is very common. And I won't go into what you can play. You can actually play either one, and they do slightly different things, because you still just want a castle. You don't mind even giving up another pawn at the right time. You want to keep the pressure, basically. Danish Gambit's all about attacking. But this is what black can do, or does do very often. They'll take, delay, and now they can do a check. And then they have both pieces out of the way so they can castle. Makes sense. What they probably, I don't know why I put the d5 there. What they probably shouldn't do, though, is knight takes. Again, I still control d5. And after just simply castling, I think there are just too many threats already. And this is just move number 6, I believe we're on, 6 or 7. Queen going to b3. A lot of pressure already if we go to b3. We still now have taking on f7 check. And queen of d5 picking up the knight, and they lost castling, got a pawn. We have rook over to this nice open line now. We still can take care if they don't, and accelerate their development. Our bishop's got a couple, if it does go to b2, a couple great places to go afterwards, after we take this pawn. So this is actually kind of a rough position, because d5, we're still taking the pawn. We control d5, and this knight might be under a lot of pressure. So I think this is a great position already for white. So they really shouldn't get greedy and take that e-pawn. So they decided to play d6. And I don't like that because it blocks this bishop. It makes it a little bit harder. Black now is accepting the fact that they're going to be very cramped for the moment. Very cramped. How do they complete the development? Even if they're up a pawn or 2 pawns, I'm going to castle and get all my pieces very active very quickly. All right, so After d6, I play what you can castle. Castle is also a great option. I played queen b3. And I try to do this as soon as I can, when I can, because now how are they dealing with the pressure of this battery on f7? And by putting pressure on the b-pawn, it means this bishop is going to have a hard time coming out to play, because queen takes on b7 can be very strong. That rook's still in the corner, right? All right, so again, this is just, we're going to not play the whole game. We're just going to get to a couple key moments here, and this is another key one. And how does black deal with this pressure? Again, well, I'm still going to castle, so going to get a rook involved. My bishop's got plenty of good places to go. How do they deal with this pawn? That's the real question. And here, well, they have queen d7. I kind of like this a little bit more. It protects the f-pawn. It's still behind the d-pawn, so you can go forward at the right time. And more importantly, later in the game, this bishop might be able to come out. It can't do it right away because it'll cut off the queen's protection to f7. That's why you're playing queen d7, protecting f7. But because your bishop on c8 is tied down to this b-pawn, it's not going anywhere. I'd much rather block this bishop than this bishop, because I want a castle if I'm black. It just makes sense to me. Instead, they played queen e7. Absolutely don't like it. Now you're accepting, if you're black, being cramped. How are you going to castle either way? And putting your queen in front of your king is never a good idea. By playing knight f3, I already showed I'm going to castle. And are you really going to take this e-pawn? All right. But more importantly, d5 loses much of its strength. There's no queen behind it. So I'm not worried about maybe doing a trade here with my queen standing in the center at the right time, as long as the e-line is open. All right, so I castled. And now there's some choices. Can they take? Absolutely not. That would be too dangerous. And still, my knight's going to come out, and with the queen over here might be a target. Well, the most normal move in this position is knight c6, and here's the last thing I'll show real quick what I think black should play, which is, I think knight to d7 is actually a little more interesting. Again, this light-squared bishop is not coming out. It's guarding the b-pawn, right? And yes, by going to c6, many times black's thinking of knight a5. But with the bishop staying here, guarding a b-pawn for the third time, knight a5 is just a queen check. Boop! And this knight, rather, is not protected. So it doesn't really gain a whole lot for black. Granted, knight c6 does target here, and it can block stuff up, right? Once you get to knight here, how am I going to get through and open up the e-line? It gets a little tough, maybe. But knight c6, I like knight bd7 better. It does the same idea. And allows a c6, which is actually pretty important. And the idea of knight going to c5 instead, with maybe some ideas, is actually a little more threatening to in my opinion, than going to a5 to c5. All right. So knight c6 is what's played, but I have a safe king. I'm not worried about pawns. They're very cramped here. This is a bad position for their queen and king. What do you want to do when you're the attacker and your king is safe? Especially, you want to just open up the center. So they don't have time to put their knight on e5. They don't have time to block my e-pawn. I'm just going forward. Let's open this up. All right, they take. Put my rook on that line now. Now I have this threat here. Once this knight is removed, which, is not going to be too hard, I have this knight. Whoops, this knight coming forward. This bishop has a couple good spots. It can go to f4 or g5. This is already becoming a rough position for black. And one more time in Blitz, this is not easy. So they've already made, I think, one inaccuracy. Now they make a second. They're worried about this pawn, and they think they're attacking my knight. Well, they're not, are they? My knight's not running away on f3. So I take this pawn, add the pressure. And what's the next move? Well, now they make another big mistake, which is basically just wasting time. It doesn't lose a piece directly or something, but it does waste time. So they played knight a5. All right, my queen's attacked, but now I check, and now I'm attacking the knight. They have to run back, and now they're kind of getting maybe a little bit low on time at some point. This is, again, 3-minute blitz. I want to put more pressure on them, and I'm trying to be a little clever. This is pretty straightforward. White's got a good position, and I think that bishop b5 pretty much seals the deal, because the queen, the pawn, and the rook are all piling up in the c-pawn, and once the rook gets involved, pretty much it's curtains. And with the bishop over on b5, with this knight, I still have a battery with a threat, and they have to deal with that threat and taking on the e-pawn. This is pretty much a very good Danish Gambit for white at this point. And this can happen very easily. But I tried to be a little too spicy. I love spicing up and doing attacks, and I tried to play, I thought it was a clever move, bishop d5 instead. And it's still a pretty good move, but not quite the same. I figured I would attack on c6 and add another attacker to e4. And I wasn't really worried about their knight taking, because obviously I'm still piling up on this pawn, and once this rook, again, gets through that pawn, it's almost curtains for black. All right, but the big difference with the bishop being on d5 to b5 is at the right time, the right time they can capture a bishop. So if you're going to give up a lot of material to get a queen, and that's one of the goals of chess, get rid of the queen so it's easier to checkmate, you don't want to give up too much material. So having my bishop on d5 in some lines is almost too much material. All right, let's get to their move, which is they unpin. Makes sense. I don't have pressure on the b-pawn. Makes a lot of sense. And here I probably should just do what the computer recommends, which is just bishop takes on d5. And there's just too many threats probably for them to deal with. Again, where's the black king going? This is just too strong for white. Tried to mix it up, though, and I took with the knight instead. Notice my bishop is not defended. My thinking was I have knight going to d6 or f6 with check, picking up that queen. And I figured that'd be nice. But notice, I'm giving up a knight and a rook for the queen. But here I might be giving up the bishop. So unless I'm continuing my attack, keeping the king in the center, that's a lot of material, maybe even too much material. All right. But this is also, again, when you play this type of spicy chess, it's easy to go wrong. It's not easy to find the best moves every time. All right, so they move their knight. Makes a little sense, right, with the discovered attack, and they're threatening to take this knight with check. This is the only thing protecting my rook. Maybe white will make a mistake, and, they don't have this rook protecting it, and the back rank weakness, maybe white will make a mistake. But this really is just a little too much, and now basically the game is over. Save my queen from the attack, put it back with this battery, protecting my bishop, attacking the b-pawn, just too much pressure on this line, and I'll play a couple more moves. Boom, they take with check. I took with the pawn, no reason to break this up. I'm not worried about it, even though my rook's not protected. Once my bishop gets developed, g5, again, this is just too cramped for black. This is just too much, and if the queen tries to leave, I'm targeting an f-pawn. I'm gonna get this b-pawn. This is just too much. All right, so they took the bishop, and I decided that, yes, I could take the knight, but I do an in-between move. Attack here, attack there with my queen, and I still have checks. Whoops, checks. And picking up their queen at the right time. Notice, as long as their king stays in the center, I don't mind giving up a bunch of pieces for the queen, as long as I can keep their king in the center. All right, so I did expect this. In this position, I was looking. I could just take this knight, try to keep the pressure, right? I could even play bishop g5, which is very interesting instead, right? Attack the queen with tempo, protect our rook. So bishop g5 is also very interesting. But I like the in-between move, attacking these two pieces, get that pawn, kind of make it so they can't even think about casting queenside. But I knew that knight b6 was definitely a move they could play, or maybe would play. But I figured after knight b6, boop, which is what it was played, and then I would play bishop g5, I thought this was just too much for black to handle, because their king is still just stuck in the center. And yes, now I've given up a piece instead of the pawns. We each have 5 pawns. But with this situation, I feel like I'm getting back the queen for a rook at least, no matter what. I figured this was just too much, so I really like this position. All right, here they're running low on time, and they kind of bailed out. They could have played f6, right, which is kind of what I was expecting. And after, not a check, because this rook is protected, I don't need to give away the knight. I now could play knight c5, though. And the line I was thinking about is they take the bishop, and I don't actually have to take the queen right away. It's kind of pinned, right? And not kind of. It's absolutely pinned to the king. So can they block? Well, no, because my knight's on c5, so I'll just take the bishop also, along with still getting the queen. Why am I playing a4? Well, the knight is protecting. Remove the defender. Make a threat. Boom. So that's not too bad. And I really like this position for white. I think it's winning. So again, I played bishop g5, which, by the way, the computer didn't really like, even though it still shows a plus for white. Yeah, I think this is a great position for white. But with low on time, Black bailed out. Queen takes g5. Try to get as much as they could for the queen. I take back with check. Bishop e7. Queen e4. And you don't really need to see too much more. All right. So, one more time. The best way to experience the Danish Gambit is to actually just play it. Just try it. Get in there. And to develop your attacking skills. Don't worry about losing. Some advice is don't trade away your diagonal pieces. Your 2 bishops and queen especially. And, just try to put pressure on your opponent. And it's okay to be down 2 pawns. Get your pieces active. All right, this is Coach Aaron, and at the end of every class, at the end of every lesson, you guys know I like to do a joke. All right, what's a good joke here? All right, I got it. What do you call a bear in the rain? Well, I call that bear a drizzly bear. Ba-dum-bum. All right, this is Coach Aaron out. Peace.